Hey, everybody out there. It's time again for What You Reading. I get asked a lot, especially for the Ask Chuck Dixon channel. Frequent question: what are you reading? Are you reading any current comics? What novels are you reading? What are you reading when you're not writing? And I suppose people are curious because I'm a professional writer, so maybe they want my opinion. See if I like something they like, don't like something they don't like. so, so I found a few things I liked and one thing I didn't like that I've read recently. Something I liked a whole lot was this collection of Judge Dredd Control by Rob Williams and Chris Weston. Um, this is one kick-ass Judge Dredd collection, just primo stuff from cover to cover. Rob Williams is a Judge Dredd writer, 2000 AD writer I've read before, and stuff was okay. It was entertaining, but here every story in this volume, it's like he torqued it up to 11. These are you know these are stories worthy of John Wagner and Alan Grant. I mean, these are terrific Judge Dredd stories. Every single one of them. And what I like about them, there's many things I like about them. And well, the Chris Weston artwork does not hurt. This guy's stuff is literally a feast for the eyes. I mean, you just I read this thing through, and then went back and just stared at the pages. I mean, they're just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know if you're watching this rather than listening to it. This guy's stuff is fantastic. Always been a big fan of Chris Weston. He really brings it every single time. But from the story standpoint, what I like is there's a great variety in the stories, of tone, of approach. Um, in and the best the collection is named Control for an extended arc in 2000 AD, featuring Judge Pin, and Judge Pin is part of like an internal affairs division amongst the judge, and she's a complete and utter psycho. I mean, it's a really dark story, even though it has bits of humor, dark humor, and bits of social commentary in it, like every good Judge Dredd story should have. There's something, even though it's set in the future, it's set in this dystopic future. There should always be something in a Judge Dredd story that connects somehow to our lives. Extrapolating something, illustrating the absurd through absurdity or whatever. But this first story is fantastic. And the follow up stories, they don't disappoint either. They range from, ironic twist endings, action stories, detective stories, and humor. And once again, always present in the stories is this social commentary. And these are some of the best Dredd stories, recent Dredd stories I've ever read. Just terrific stuff. And if you're in the UK and you're a big fan of Dredd in 2000 AD, I'm probably just telling you something you already know. You're probably like duh. Uh, this is great stuff. But it was new to me because we really don't get that much update or exposure or marketing of Dredd in the 2000 AD material here in the land of the free. Uh, but if you have never, even if you have never read Dredd, somebody asked me recently, where do I start with Dredd? This ain't a bad place to start because it's all here. All the basics are here. All the great stuff is here. And as you can see, just jaw-dropping artwork. Chris Weston, man, that guy is, he's superhuman. Just terrific stuff. And, primo Dredd on every page. Not one story disappointed in any way. So highly recommend Judge Dredd Control to all of you out there, my fellow Americans, because you Brits probably know all about it. I mean, as far as I know, this is like your Dark Knight Returns, and I don't know that. Fantagraphics Books is beginning to collect. They're doing the Lord's work. They're collecting Atlas comics from the 50s into these beautifully realized hardcovers, tremendous restorations. They're doing a Joe McNeely book. They're going to be doing a war book. Hopefully, they're going to do a Russ Heath book and print some of the stories I can't afford to buy. I'd love to see I'm just going nuts here. I'd love to see a jungle, the jungle series, their Western series, whatever. But Fantagraphics is reprinting and lovingly restoring these Atlas comics, because Atlas Comics, which is Atlas is what Marvel was called before they changed the name to Marvel Comics. They produced some terrific stuff, particularly pre-Code. I mean, after Code, they were good too. They were, top of the heap. But pre-Code, in horror, in war, in Western, in adventure, they were just fantastic stuff. And as usual, a bit of a grab bag, a bit of a potpourri. And this early Adventures in Terror, these are early Atlas comics. And the highlight of them, I'm not going to lie to you, is the Russ Heath stories. And for me, anyway, I love Russ Heath. The Russ Heath stories are all uniformly good or goofy fun, because Russ brings it. Now, there's two reasons why his stories stand out in this collection, and I mean stand way out in this collection. First, Russ may have been taking the scripts and fixing them, dramatizing them more, or it may be that Russ was usually associated with Hank Chapman when he worked at Atlas. Hank Chapman wrote largely war stories for Atlas, a lot of war stories for DC in the 50s. I don't know a whole lot about Hank Chapman, but I know that his stuff was consistently good. He understood the language of comics. He knew how to get a story up on its feet and running. And he was the one who most frequently worked with Heath. And I think that collaboration, even at DC, they worked together quite a bit. I think that collaboration is what really makes these stories sing, what really makes them work. The rest of the collection, not so much. There's one Basil Wolverton story. Basil Wolverton's always cool. Always brings some weirdness. Obviously love comics a whole lot. And the unusual thing about Wolverton is he seemed to have done everything, because whenever there's a Wolverton story, no matter what company it shows up at, the lettering is always the same. So I have to assume that Wolverton was lettering his own stuff. I don't know much about Basil Wolverton. I really should read more about him, because I always enjoy his work, because it's always so different. Nobody drew like Basil Wolverton. Nobody did comics like Basil Wolverton. And what I have to assume is that he would just complete a comic story and then shop it around, and whoever bought it bought it. He didn't go in and pitch. He didn't take other people's scripts. I imagine. I have to imagine that Basil Wolverton wrote all of his own stories, because no one else would have thought of the weird stuff that he thought of. So that's one highlight. Another highlight, there's one Joe Maneely story, which is pretty good. It's early. The artwork's pretty good. Story's horrible. And there's a early Gene Colan, where you can see little glimpses of what Gene Colan would become. But once again, the story's wretched. For the most part, the stories are wretched. They're contrived, twisted ending pulled out of the writers. But most of these stories, the greatest sin of most of these stories is they take way too long to get to the horror or supernatural element in the story. I mean, you might read a 6-page story and not see any vampires, werewolves, or ghoulies till like page 5. And leading up to that is all this setup and dialogue with, a couple of adults yapping. Just lousy stories. With the horror boom, and this was at the center of that, Adventures in Terror was part of the horror boom in the 50s. It was about quantity, let's face it. So you had, things would improve as time went on. But generally, these stories are awful. They're obviously written by guys who think, anybody reading a comic book who's older than 10 years old has to be a moron. And there's a real condescension or just lack of talent, maybe. And a lot of the artwork is also amateurish and kind of not good, or it's very, very pedestrian. Stories are boring and even hard to understand sometimes, because the contrivances in them are like maddening. They come up with this insane concept and then try to make it work, and it doesn't. And it appears they didn't put a whole lot of effort into it. I mean, if I've read one, I've read 100 stories where the vampire turns out to be a werewolf or the werewolf turns out to be a ghost. I mean, just stupid endings like that. But still, if if you're just a casual comics reader, you're not going to want to buy this book because it's, I don't know, it's $30, $40. So don't waste your money on it. But if you're a real hardcore comics aficionado like me, and particularly love Atlas comics like I do, this book really is a must-have. Just to see the evolution of Atlas as they shifted from superheroes and to the horror genre, to other genres, war and Western and romance and the rest of it. So anyway, cool stuff if you have a taste for it. So, but don't think you're going to have a lot of fun reading most of these stories because they are piss poor. Not good comics. And the funny thing is, I mean, I see writers still making the same mistakes today. So, I'm not giving these old comic book hands a hard time because there's plenty of people around that don't understand the craft to the same level some of these guys did. Okay, my disappointment of the week was this book called The Three Ghosts of Tesla. I don't know why I bought it. I don't even remember buying it. Maybe somebody sent it to me. If they did, I'm apologizing now. It's a graphic novel. It's very handsomely produced from a company I've never heard of. And it's well drawn, but the color palette is so limited. Everything, look, this page is typical of the entire volume, where everything is either in browns or monochromatic cool shades. Even daytime shots aren't really, there's no sunny days. Now, what the story is, it's the really, really, really tired trope of that Thomas Edison was a conniving bastard and Nikola Tesla was this, sainted individual. And I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to come down either way on this. I'm an admirer of both men. And that day was what that day was. Would we be better off if we had gone Tesla's route? Perhaps. But we went Edison's route, and which allows me to talk to you right now. Which keeps the lights on. And charges your Tesla if the weather's right. So, Nikola Tesla came up with a different form of energy generation and ways to deliver electricity to your house. Edison came up with the one we use today. And apparently Edison took advantage of Tesla and stole a bunch of patents, patented a bunch of Tesla's creations and everything else. Both men were amazing. Both men were geniuses in their own way. But anyway, this story takes up that, and it weirdly sets itself during World War II, long after Edison was dead. And in a way, this kind of reminds me of the Atlas stories I was talking about, because this story takes forever to get up off the blocks. This little boy in 1940s New York, wartime New York, he has a strange neighbor, and a stranger delivers a letter to him for his strange neighbor. And for page after page after page after page, the boy hesitates to deliver the letter. That is not drama. That's certainly not moving your story forward. I mean, he always gets close to delivering the letter and then doesn't. Who writes this way? When he finally delivers the letter, it's to Nikola Tesla, who dies and becomes a ghost in front of his eyes. Are you still with me? And from there on, it's this confused story taking place during World War II that hardly ever references World War II, except to show some soldiers stranded on a desert island in the Pacific. We never see any World War II combat. Apparently, I mean, I read this thing and then looked back through it. Nazi Germany is not mentioned a whole lot. It is never mentioned. There's no Nazi Germany in this version of World War II. As you can see, it's beautifully drawn and well researched for period stuff and all the rest of it. But the story's so off-putting and odd and strange and pointless. Ultimately, a bunch of agents working for the ghost of Thomas Edison It's not really a ghost. He's an animated corpse. He's Edison apparently in this story used some sort of technology to keep his brain alive, even though his body is dead. And he guides this. He acts like a Bond villain, guiding this army of weirdos around New York, and they're murdering people and looking for something. There's a MacGuffin that everybody wants, and all the rest of it. And it's weird. Why would you set this during World War II New York? Why wouldn't you set it earlier in the century, like when both men were alive, and you didn't have a far greater evil trying to take over the planet than a war between two technocrats? It's just a strange book, but as you can see, it's beautifully done. Such a waste. I mean, if they had taken this style and this effort and done a straight up World War II espionage story, I'd be raving about it right now. Even if it wasn't a great story, I'd be raving. At least they made an effort, and it would look gorgeous. But yeah, this I don't get it. Somebody explain it to me. If you've read it and like it, explain it to me. But that's it. That's what I've been reading. Some of what I've been reading anyway. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I'll see all of you down the road.